Thank you.
So folks, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Thank you for coming tonight. Everybody hear me all right? Okay. All right, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to tonight's forum for candidates seeking Cole County offices in the November 6th election. I'm Gary Castor, Managing Editor of the Jefferson City News Tribune. I'll serve as moderator of tonight's forum. I want to take this opportunity to thank the city for the use of these council chambers, as well as JCTV for taping and airing the forums. We're also streaming these forums on newstribune.com. Tonight, our first forum will feature the candidates for Recorder of Deeds. That forum will be followed by forums for County Clerk, Prosecuting Attorney, and Associate Circuit Judge. Prior to tonight, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum, which will include opening statements, general questions for the candidates, and then their closing statements. Candidates will be given a minute for their opening statement. As we begin the questioning rounds, the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Seated next to me will be Rebecca Martin, News Tribune City Editor. She'll serve as the timekeeper tonight for the forum. None of these questions were shared with the candidates beforehand. During the course of the forum, I may ask a candidate a follow-up question in hopes of getting a clearer understanding of his or her stance. Some of these questions were from News Tribune staff. Some of these questions came from readers who submitted them. Now let me introduce the candidates for tonight's Recorder of Deeds forum. To my left is Judy Ridgway. She's the former Chief Deputy Recorder of Deeds. She defeated incumbent Ralph Bray in the August primary, and she's the Republican candidate for the seat. To my right is Ted Stewart. He is a longtime businessman. He's previously run as a candidate for mayor and city council. He's the Democratic candidate for the seat. The order for the opening and closing statements was determined before this forum by drawing lots. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for an opening statement, and we'll begin with Judy.
Thank you, Gary. I certainly appreciate you having us here tonight and the rest of the News Tribune staff for all of the interviews. Jeff Haldeman has been really great and patient with scheduling. I am Judy Ridgway, and as Gary said, I am the Republican candidate for the office of Recorder of Deeds. I worked in the Recorder's office for 18 years. I've lived in Jefferson City for 35 years. I am married to my husband, Doug, who is here tonight, for 41 years. Together, we've raised 3 children and welcomed 2 grandchildren. I've been involved in the community here in Jefferson City with my church, Faith Lutheran Church, for 35 years, with Scouts, with volunteer work, and I'm still involved and continue to be involved. It's been a wonderful place to raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Ted, you're next.
You know, it's hard to tell whether these microphones are high enough or not. Does this sound good?
Scoot it, pull a little bit closer to your face, and it should just pull straight towards you.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
All right, how's that sound? Well, my name is, in fact, Ted Stewart. I went to high school here. Did not graduate with honors, but graduated. Big time on music and plays and that sort of thing. And of course, women had a little something to do with my behavior in high school. After high school, I did a season of summer stock in Branson, Missouri, back when it was just a little country town, and maybe 2 hotels there, or motels. And I bummed around for a year or so and joined the Marine Corps at 19, which was a shock to me. Took me about 5 seconds on Parris Island to realize that I had really done it this time. I finished the Marine Corps boot camp and got an invitation to go to Marine Academy. I turned it down and went back to my reserve unit in Kansas City, got married, went into business, been married for 56 years, got 2 kids, and I will answer questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so let's begin our questions. We're going to start the first question with Ted. The duties and expectations of the Recorder of Deeds are not widely known to the public. How would you explain the responsibility of the office of Recorder of Deeds, as well as your role in that office, to a voter?
The Recorder of Deeds does not sit at the desk and record deeds all day long. He's in charge of the people that do that. He overlooks everything that they do. He is responsible for their good deeds and bad deeds, no pun intended. I cannot boast 18 years experience like my opponent, but my job for the last 40 years has been problem solving, running businesses, and making sure that my deeds were recorded properly and in a timely manner, and that the deeds on the property that I bought were in order. And I know a little bit about it, and the Recorder of Deeds is in charge of the deputies who do the work, and basically a Recorder of Deeds, a chief deputy or a deputy that does that work, take your deeds as prepared by an attorney or an abstract company, and make sure it's in order and record the deed properly. If it is not proper, you do not change it, you don't do anything with it but send it back to the person who submitted it to you and say, check for errors, fix this, take it to a title company if you must, and bring it back to us. That's my perception of the office, and my intention is to be fully involved with the county and county government, because I foresee problems in the future that are going to need to be dealt with, and I have promised some of the county leaders that I would assist them, and they have asked me to do so.
All right, thank you. Judy, same question.
The primary responsibility of the Recorder of Deeds is to record, preserve, and protect real estate documents and historical irreplaceable documents of our county. The recorder needs to embrace the Missouri revised statutes as guideposts, so that you are to ensure that everything is recorded correct and accurate.
All right. Judy, this question starts with you. What skills or experience do you bring to the table that your opponent does not?
I've worked in the recorder's office for 18 years. I've worked every job in the office, including chief deputy recorder. I have
I'm sorry, let's start over, okay?
Okay.
Pull the microphone a little bit closer to you. I'm having a hard time, and I'm thinking others may be as well. There you
Move
go.
this?
Yep, you can move that. Pull it closer to you. There we go.
Okay. Start over.
Yes, please. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
I want
that's
you to be
fine.
able to be heard.
I've worked in the Recorder of Deeds office for 18 years. I've worked every job in the office. I have written grants, procedures. I've trained the staff. I've trained the current recorder. I have worked with the auditor. I've worked with the commissioners. I was the go-to person for just about any problem that was there. I have benchmarked all of the software, all of the hardware. I was a key person in making sure that everything was merged into our system correct and accurately. I have made codes for all the many different document types that come across the office so that the data entry person can enter them in a consistent and correct manner. I think there isn't anything in the office that I haven't worked job-wise, worked at, and then eventually managed the office. I have filled in for the recorder when he's out. I have went to all of the PRIA conferences, which is records management. I've worked with all of the recorders in the state of Missouri. I've even benchmarked with recorders out of the state of Missouri. I think I've worked with everybody in the courthouse to provide a correct and accurate recordings for our office.
Okay, but to redirect to the question is what skills do you bring to the table that your opponent does not? So are you saying that he does not have that experience and that's what distinguishes you, or just to clarify in my mind?
I don't think he has that experience. I don't think the staff members currently there have that experience, because I'm not a person who started and just stayed in their lane. I've studied and embraced all of what the recorder does. So I do not think that my skill level competes with Mr. Stewart's. Correct.
Okay, Ted, same question to you. What skills or experience do you bring to the table that your opponent does not, that would benefit the office?
I'm not sure that I can make the distinction of that I'm better or worse than she is about this or that. All I can tell you is that I have done business in 7 countries, from Canada to Brazil to England to Switzerland, and 9 states in the United States, from New York to California. And when I say done business, I went there, drew up contracts, did business with people, bought property, syndicated property. I did tax-advantaged investments until 1986, when Ronald Reagan, our president at that time, sponsored a bill to make our tax-advantaged investments not tax-advantaged anymore. So that was the end of that. But it was a good ride, and I had a lot of good experiences traveling around doing what I did. Most everything that I did involved property, real property, and of course that's deeded through a recorder of deeds somewhere. And I kind of always said that I have a slightly legal background because of the kind of work that I did. And my son's an attorney here in Jefferson City, as a matter of fact. And I have been practically living with attorneys throughout my career in all the different places that I was, because that's just the kind of work that I did.
So how does that experience, how will that benefit the office?
Well, they have the benefit of my experience in dealing with all these types of instruments. You know, it's no big secret what the recorder of deeds does and how he or she does it. It's been there forever and ever. I mean, geez, we had one recorder before us that was there 52 years. And I happen to remember him because I've been in Jefferson City in business since, I'm going to have to say, 1960. It's a long time. And I've done a lot of property deals. So other than having experience doing what they do on the other end, there's no comparison to what I did to what she does. But in essence, it's the same thing.
All right. So we're going to get a little bit farther into the weeds about the whole role of the recorder of deeds, because both of you have very divergent views as to the role of the recorder. From my perspective, Judy, you've said that the role of the office is to help prevent residents from having to pay additional expenses or having conflicts with their neighbors or families. Ted has said the staff or recorder doesn't need to read or review the documents and correct the errors. He contends the recorder is only charged with sending the documents back to the originating properties so that they can address any issues. Why is your approach the right approach? And we're going to start this with Ted.
I don't have a really good answer to that, because there is no good answer to that. The fact is that a deed is either correct or it's incorrect when it's brought in, submitted to the office. I guess if there's something that needs to be done, then the recorder of deeds or appointees need to know enough about deeds, whether it's correct or not. And, you know, it goes without saying that you figure that out soon after you get there. Judy, I'm sure, didn't go to school to learn how to be a recorder of deeds or an assistant recorder of deeds before she got there. I mean, you learn it when you're in the offices, has all the recorder of deeds and their assistants and deputies have while they come to the office to work. So my answer is pretty simple. I don't know that there's anything complicated about learning how to do the deed work. Sure, it helps if you've done it, but at some point in time, everybody ever came into that office to work didn't know anything about recording deeds. At least I've got the experience of being on the other end of the recording of deeds, and it's no mystery to me.
All right, thank you. Judy, same question.
I obviously think there is a correct method here. Mr. Stewart may have filed a lot of documents in his time, but he has been fortunate to have had the person sitting at the desk knowledgeable and trained, and they ensured that his documents were filed correctly, that, you know, you can file documents all day long. When I started the recorder's office, their filing system was so inadequate that you couldn't find the deeds. You couldn't find by legal description, you couldn't find it by owner. It's based on a grantor-grantee system. It's important to understand when you're looking at a document, who is a grantor, who is the grantee. When you're entering a legal description, for instance, there is like a Curry's subdivision, Lot 8 Curry subdivision in Lot 2. How are we going to enter that so it can be found? If there isn't consistency and knowledge, it's actually that's filed years ago. It was filed under W.A. Curry's subdivision in Lot 2. If you're not familiar with the timeline and all of the many different types of legal descriptions, and how are you going to get those filed into a consistent order so that a title company, when they do their research, they can find it. They depend on it. They issue title insurance, and if a title company comes into the recorder's office and the database isn't consistent, if there's errors, if the staff isn't trained, the title company will get sued if they miss something, because it's the recorder's responsibility to ensure that everything filed has a system, a chronological order system in place so that they can find documents. If they cannot and they're sued, the recorder ultimately will be sued, because it is their responsibility to make sure that your documents are filed. And I did attend title school to learn legal descriptions, and I have been, I'm out of time. Sorry.
Next question. We're going to start with Judy. Do you believe security issues exist in how Cole County is currently handling documents? And if so, how would you address them?
Yes, I do. There are security issues as far as safeguarding the integrity of someone's document. It is public record. All of the documents are public record. However, there are social security numbers on documents. Years ago, they even put birth dates on documents. Some of them have ages, addresses, and I think that it is the recorder's responsibility to safeguard the personal information of the citizens. We can do that we can redact it before we scan it, if it's on there. And there are documents out there that still have on birth dates and social security numbers.
So do you believe security issues exist, per the question? And if so, how would you address them?
Yes, they are issues with information, and they are issues with also online information, the data that's online. You have to understand how technology changes, your medium changes all the time to protect somebody from maybe getting into your system, crashing your system. You have to be aware of all of the IT.
All right. Ted, same question.
You know, the answer to that question, as Judy said, you know, she knows there are problems. And how did the problems get there? If she's been there 18 years, why are there still problems? Is she not to correct those problems? Or she didn't know them until yesterday afternoon? I don't know. But sure, you always have to continually upgrade your computer system, your security system. I mean, hey, when I started in doing my business work with the recorder's office, we did it with abstracts that were that thick, and I mean, you page by page go all the way back down to a land grant from the government. And you had to follow that through, and attorneys had to go through and make sure there were no breaks in the line of ownership and divisions of the ownership in the property. And you know, there was a long process. An attorney's charging an arm and a leg to go through that, because I mean, they don't do that anymore. And title companies handle all the title work. And you don't have attorneys charging you $200 an hour to go through a volume of documents that thick. It's different today. It's going to be different tomorrow. Our computer system up there, it has had several upgrades in the past few years, and there's more needed, as it will always be. You always have to stay on top of your computer system and your systems all together. So with that said, there's always going to be problems, and if there's not, why is there problems there now? If she's been there 18 years, it's not her fault. They're just there, and they have to be looked after, and I appreciate that.
All right. Judy, I'll give you a chance to rebut. He says you were there during that time, the problems existed.
Well, I don't think me being there is going to eliminate somebody hacking into the computer system. We do have an IT person that has been there as long as I've been there and longer, that keeps on track of our firewall. And the problems I'm talking about is staying on top of your IT, staying on top of your software system. So somebody, when we have people who pay $250 a month to use our service, so that we know who is using our service, so that there aren't any problems. We have been fortunate to not have any problems, but I'm just saying we have to stay on top of the technology, and then we have to also correct issues before they happen with our computer system.
All right. All right, so next question, we're going to start with Ted. So if you're elected, you will be assuming a staff that it currently is there. How would you assess the current staff? Is your plan to keep them, to expand it? contract it? What is your plan?
You know, a staff is probably the most critical thing that you have in your office. And if I were taking over tomorrow, the first thing I would do is sit down with the staff, get to know them, find out how they like their job or what they don't like about it, if they intend to stay, if they have enough education built into the system so that they can stay on top of everything. And my job is not to take over the office, it's to take over the management of the office. You know, the foreman on a construction job rarely walks around with a hammer in his hand and starts putting together the lumber. Your job is to make sure everybody else is doing their job properly and make sure that they're properly instructed on how to do it and they keep their time correctly. And we just have to make sure that our staff is doing well, and I have no way of making an intelligent statement about it until I get into office and interview them and find out what's going on. At this point, I have not received any inkling that there's serious trouble in the office. And Judy's been there all that time. So, I mean, that speaks well for her.
All right. Judy, same question.
I think my job is to assure the function of the recorder's office in its entirety, from how the documents are entered to how the staff, how well they're trained, how it functions, the software, the hardware. The complaints that I've heard when I've been out campaigning since March is that in the last 3 to 4 months, there has been a software update and then it doesn't function as well as it used to, and that there are a lot of errors in the database, which goes back to either the staff is overloaded or maybe there's someone not as trained as they should be. But I think the job overall is just to assure that the recorder's office functions in its entirety.
All right. My last question to both of you, and this will start with Judy. So both of you will be elected, one of you will be an elected official. And you will manage a staff that is funded by the county commission. What do you perceive the relationship is between the Recorder of Deeds office and the county commission?
I have sat in meetings for years with budgets. I have worked on the budget. I have submitted budgets. I work well with all 3 commissioners. I've worked well with the auditor. In fact, anytime there was a question or a problem, they would call me instead of the recorder because most of the time I knew the answer. So I feel like I have a good rapport. It is important for the recorder to have a good rapport with the county commissioners and with all of the elected officials. I've worked with the clerk's office. I think we have a good rapport. I don't think there is an office in the courthouse I haven't worked with. And I feel I have a good rapport with all of the elected officials.
Ted, same question.
I believe that working in the recorder's office has been acceptable. I don't know that I'd grade it excellent or poor. I'd have no way of knowing that. It's simple, guys. You either record the deeds and get it done or you don't. You either issue your marriage license or you don't, and it's done correctly. I don't know that there's been a serious problem up there, but you do have to work at it all the time to stay upgraded and be able to keep up with the business as it changes. And it will change and always change. And I guess the job of the recorder of deeds is to be watchful and to know what's going on in your office and assist the other county officials in taking care of any problem that they may have, because ours is strictly on recording the deeds. Theirs is to take care of the safety and the welfare of the people who live in the county. And there are times when they run into problems trying to get certain things done and make everybody happy. You've got the Chamber of Commerce, you've got the city, you've got the citizens to worry about, and everybody has their own idea how to make the cup of coffee. And I get the feeling from some of the county officials that things haven't been easy for them, and there's some things not being done that should be done they need some help on. And I actually, in fact, have been asked to help if I'm successful in this race.
All right. So let's go to our closing statements. We'll start with Judy, and you'll have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, first I would like to say, I'd have to say to Mr. Stewart, if he thinks that it's simple, then he clearly does not understand the functions and the details and the intricacies in the recorder's office. And I've worked with all the county officials, and they count on me for advice, they count on me for a budget, and there hasn't been any problem in the 18 years. I've actually been told that the office ran a lot smoother when I was there. So I'm surprised that he thinks it's simple. If elected, he will find out how simple it isn't. But I just wanted to make that statement. I think for my closing, I would just have to say that it is the responsibility of the Recorder of Deeds to provide all citizens of Cole County with a recorder's office they can be confident in. I think that it's important that the recorder uses the Missouri Revised Statutes as a guidepost to ensure the accuracy of documents. I think it's important for the recorder to be able to function with all the elected officials, and I have done that. And I have 18 years' experience in all aspects of the recorder's office, and I feel I am going to be the more confident and, yeah. And I will provide the most effective job for the citizens of our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Ted?
Well, it's an interesting meeting. I have been asked, as she has, to tell you what the Office of the Recorder is all about, and what's easy about it and what's hard about it. And are there any problems or there aren't any problems? You know, it's hard for me to get away from what I originally told you. I am a problem solver. I am a huge problem solver. And I've done it for 55, 60 years, big time. My parents were school teachers. My brother's a school teacher. My two sisters are school teachers. I didn't go to college. And I started out, hit the floor, hit the ground running, and did a lot of deals. Some good, some bad, some so-so. But I did a lot of deals. And did reasonably well. And I'm tickled to death with what I did, and I love the education that I got. And I was approached by some county folks that if I chose to take a position in the county and run for it, they would love to have my help, because they know that I am a problem solver, and I will face it eye to eye, anytime, anywhere, and work out the problem.
Okay, thank you, Ted. You're at your 1 minute mark there, so I'm gonna stop you there. All right. So we're gonna take a short break. We'll come back in about 5 minutes for the county clerk forum. I appreciate both of you for coming to this forum and answering these questions. And so at this time, we're going to take a short break.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And a slice of heaven.
We'll just use the paper.
The last one Ken brought up notes, please don't. All you can really have is what you have in front of you.
So can you, if she gets the question first, can you repeat it before? Sure. Me?
Absolutely. You know, just ask you to repeat it. I'll be happy.
Oh,
Okay?
thanks. Oh. Hello?
Is this for me? Okay, so let's get started again. Welcome to tonight's candidate forum for Cole County Clerk. As I mentioned at the previous forum, prior to tonight, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum. They're going to be given 1 minute for an opening statement, and then I'll begin asking a series of questions. So let me go ahead and get right into it, and we'll introduce the candidates. To my left is Ann Merlecki. She's worked in the county clerk's office with the county's information technology systems, as well as in the finance office. She's the Green Party candidate for the seat. To my right is Steve Korsmeyer. He's the incumbent county clerk, having been elected in 2014. Previous to the election, he owned Blackwell's Garage in Jefferson City. He still farms on land outside St. Thomas, and he's the Republican candidate for the seat. The opening for the order for the opening and closing statements was determined before the forum by drawing lots, and will start. Each candidate will be given 1 minute for an opening statement. So let's begin.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ann Merkley. I'm a lifelong resident of Cole County. I've been married to my husband about...
There you go. Pull it close to your
Sorry.
face. It's all good. We just want to hear what you have to say. So,
lifelong resident of Cole County. I've been married to my husband for 34 years. I worked at Schulte's IGA in Central Dairy before going to work in the county clerk's office in 1981, where I did voter registration, elections, notaries, and liquor license, and also helped out in the finance department. In 1986, I was asked to go move up to the IT department, where I was the computer operator and did all the printing for the county. Worked with all the departments. In 2011, I was asked to move back to the county clerk's office, where I did voter registration, elections, and oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Anyway, until 2014, and I worked in the clerk's office, and then I got what I call 80 and out, and anyway, I got to spend a lot more time with my mother, and now work for the circuit clerk's office, part-time.
all right. Thank you. Steve.
My name is Steve Korsmeyer. I worked at Blackwell's Garage for 33 years. I had some longtime mechanics that were with me for several years, and they decided that they were going to retire, so I decided that I would also retire from that and seek office as a county clerk. So I was elected 4 years ago. I've been married to my wife, Leanne, for 36 years. We have 3 children. I had to get that right, so we have 3 children. We have 7 grandchildren now. My daughter had birth to twin baby girls today, so it's a great day for us. Thank you. I've enjoyed working in the clerk's office. I really look forward to getting there and working there every day. There's a lot of new things that we've done in the clerk's office. We've gotten new equipment, and look forward to another 4 years. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So let's jump into questions. Again, you'll have 2 minutes for your responses. When Rebecca holds up the response, just keep finishing your sentences, and we'll be fine. All right? Okay. So first question, we'll start with Steve. How do you believe your background or experience better qualifies you for this position?
Well, I think the county clerk's office is a lot of public relations, and I think that my background as in the service business at Blackwell's Garage kind of prepared me to work with the general public. Voter registration is very important, and getting the elections, the integrity of the elections is very important. And I was very honest and had a reliable business and had a lot of return customers that trusted me, and the office is we get very, very busy sometimes, and the elections are very important. I lost track too. What was the question again? I don't think I even covered the question.
How do you believe your background or experience better qualifies you for the position?
Okay. So, of course, I've been there for 4 years, and we've had 4 years of success. So I think that that really qualifies me to be reelected. But before that, at Blackwell's Garage, you know, working with the general public and taking care of that, I think that really helps. I don't really have anything else. Sorry.
It's all good. Ann?
Got to get the jitters
Okay,
off.
repeat the question, please.
Sure. How do you believe your background or experience better qualifies you for this position?
Okay, well, I've been with the county, or had been with the county for 33 years. I've worked with elections, voter registration. I've worked with the receiving team, the absentee team, the verification team. I've helped set up the voting equipment. I've actually gone and voted people at the hospital on election day. Absentee voting is a big, I think, important part of the election process. I've actually done every aspect of it. I've worked with the finance office and
Okay. One clarification, so you said 33 years, but that was among different, that was not all in the county clerk's office,
Right.
correct?
yes.
Okay, all right. All right, so Ann, we'll start this question with you. What steps or procedures could the county clerk pursue to simplify or make voting more simple?
I think the no excuse absentee voting would be very beneficial to the county. I know some people live far away from their polling location, so making it easier for people to be able to get to the polls and vote. And, I'm sorry, repeat that again.
Sure. What steps or procedures could the county clerk pursue to simplify or make voting simpler?
The no excuse absentee voting, I think, is the most important.
Okay.
And the centralized voting, I guess, would be important too.
All right. Steve, same question.
What I'm going to try to initiate in the future is a centralized voting location. It's a place where anybody could come to vote. You know, if you live out of town, you come to Jeff City to work. If you want to vote on your lunch hour, instead of having to run back 10, 15 miles back to your hometown, you could just simply go to that voting center and vote. So that's, there's some logistical problems there that we have to work out and have to decide whether it's financially feasible, because it is expensive. Some years, in your odd years, when you only have one April election, it's hard to spread that cost out. In presidential election years, when you have 4 elections, you know, it's easier to justify the cost of that. So that's something we're looking at. To get more people to turn out, you have to make voting convenient. So if the legislatures would pass the no excuse absentee, I think that would kind of help a little bit for people coming in, give them an opportunity to vote without having to fib about it. So that's probably all I have to say about it.
Okay. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this idea of the central voting center. The idea behind it, I think you both expressed, would be that it would be more convenient for voters if there was a centralized location where if you lived in Taos, instead of going home for lunch, you could vote at the voting center. So what are some of the obstacles that you see to that happening? Where do you think it should be within the city? And what are the expenses that you mentioned that would have to be considered? So we're going to start with Steve.
So we've kind of looked into it, and by law, I think you're allowed to have 5 voting centers. And the logistical problems are the cost. So your computers have to be, we have new poll pads, and they all have to be linked, so you can't have somebody going at a voting center to vote and then driving back to, say, their hometown and voting again. So you have to be able to, all the computers have to be linked together, and they all have to communicate so that they know when one's voted somewhere, they can't vote in the second place again. So that's one problem. The second problem is the communication between the computers themselves. They have to be hooked to Wi-Fi somehow. So when you do that, well, then you have security issues. So you don't want to have security issues with your poll pads. You don't want anybody hacking into those. So right now they're not hooked to any Wi-Fi anywhere at all. So we have to try to come up with our own hotspots. That's the expensive part. The licensing for it, we have to buy it from our supplier, and it's about $5,000, so it's very expensive. That's a yearly license, so we have to justify that amount. And if you have to have 28 hotspots, there's another cost. And when you have 4 elections, you can distribute that cost. When you have 1 election, it's hard to justify the cost and all that. We used to have cell phones and that we used for the elections, and the price went up where they wanted to start charging us monthly instead of for election. So we had to get rid of those. So that's an issue that we'll have to resolve, because that's my plan, is to try to use cell phones for hotspots if we can. It's probably more economical, but that's just some obstacles we'll have to go try to overcome.
All right, Ann, same question.
Please repeat it.
Sure. So both of you talked about the idea of a voting center as a convenience for voters. What do you see are the obstacles to making that happen? Where might it be? Give me some more details as to what your vision is for this voting center and what might prevent it from happening.
I'm not real sure where it would be. There is probably getting one in each ward in the county, maybe. I don't know how that would work. I'm not real sure.
Okay. All right. Let's go to our next question then. We're going to start with Ann. The county's reduced the number of polling places from 35 to 28. Do you think that was a good move or decision? Why or why not?
It probably was, because it would reduce the cost for each election. Some of the precincts there were two precincts in the same ward. I'm sorry, repeat the question again.
Sure. The county has reduced the number of polling places from 35 to 28. Was that a good move or decision? Why or why not?
Yes, cost effective, I believe it was.
Okay. Steve, same question.
When I came into office, there were 35 locations, and my main goal was to get new equipment. So it was very expensive. So in order to get that established, I reduced some of the polling places, less equipment, so it was more affordable for us to buy new equipment. Some, like Ann said, some polling locations had 2 precincts within it. So I thought that was, there was always confusion. When people would go into McClung Park, for instance, there was 2 polling locations in there. And people they were always confused about which line they needed to be in, so they always had to have somebody at the door to direct them. So I thought that was just too confusing. Why not just put them together and have 1 polling location? Because they're already, they're already having the volume of people come in there. So it was kind of silly to have 2 there when they were already handling the volume of people. So it was pretty cost saving as far as equipment goes, and it was cost saving as far as election judges go, because you have less judges. Especially in an April election, when you have kind of a slower turnout, the turnout isn't as great. So it was really cost effective to change it, and it was really a lot of cost savings. So.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that comes to me is whenever we reduce polling places or change polling places, it really disrupts a voting block that it's hard to get them out to come to vote in the first place. So what considerations should you take before you make changes to where you change someone's voting place? So we're going to start that one with Steve.
So it's very complicated to change a polling place because you have to notify everybody involved. So you really have to do your research and think about what you're going to change. So, of course, the schools, when I came in, we were in Morro Heights, and we had been asked to get out of it several times for security issues. So that was one of the first ones I moved. We moved them to American Legion, sent letters out, notified everybody. Of course, it's pretty congested at Morro Heights, so most people were happy. We did get a few complaints from some people. Well, you're always going to get a few. But other than that, I mean, everything else has worked out well.
All right, Ann, same question.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
Sure. So whenever you if you are elected and you're making decisions as far as what polling places to close or move, it can be very disruptive to a voting audience that it's hard to get them to the polls in the first place. What considerations, how would you go about making those decisions?
You would definitely need to notify the voters. It does disrupt the voters. I don't know that I would make any less precincts. I'm not real sure what.
Okay. Next question. So I lost my place here. So
It's pretty nerve-wracking. So
it's very it's not as easy as it looks up here.
no,
is it, guys?
no,
Okay, so who did I ask the last question?
I'll take it. I don't know, but I'll.
You started, yeah.
So I think we're going to start with Ann on this one. So, more than 3,900 August voters came to the polls with no government-issued photo ID. What issues and benefits do you believe there are with voter photo ID?
Good question. A driver's license, is that considered a voter or a government-issued voter ID? I think if you have your driver's license, tells you who the voters or the election workers who you are. So we don't have people that aren't actually registered trying to vote under someone else's name.
Okay. Steve, same question.
So I believe that we should have photo ID when we go to vote. It's currently being contested in court, I think, so we're not sure where we're at with it. But when a person comes to vote, you know, we have election judges that work every election, and we try to keep them in their hometown, like in their own precinct, so right where they live, so they don't have to travel far first off in the morning or late at night when they have to get off. And they know the voters that come in. So a lot of people work every election. They kind of recognize their neighbors when they come in and stuff like that. But the photo ID is still really a good, because you can't hardly go anywhere and get money or borrow money or do anything without having a photo ID. So it's only proper that you would use it to vote with. When you walk in there, there's no doubt, there's no question, the person standing before you is the person that's voting, because you can look at their picture and you can identify them. Also, the driver's license is what we prefer because it's scannable. It saves time in line when you walk through with the poll pad. It's just like your voter ID card. You can just scan it right through the poll pad, and your information comes up on there, and then they can see your picture and verify that it's you standing before them. So I do believe in photo ID. It's not an issue if you don't have it with you. We still can accept. You have to sign the ID statement. You can still vote. The last election, I think we had 3 people that voted provisional ballots, and when we got them back to the office and checked their signatures, all 3 of them counted. So I don't know that it's an issue. I mean, it doesn't really stop anybody from voting, because there's still 3 ways that you can vote. But I believe the driver's license is very important, and that's the way we should go.
All right, thank you. I will clarify one statement. You're right. It is in the middle of the courts, potentially going to be appealed, but the current law is that you do not have to fill out a sworn statement as we did in the previous election.
Correct. The ID statement that people have to sign, he took that away, so you wouldn't have
Correct.
to sign the ID statement.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be our last question. The goal of the county clerk's office, I think everyone would agree, is to get more voters involved, get them to the polls. So what steps can you take as county clerk, can we take as society to improve voter participation in elections? And this one will begin with Steve.
It's very hard to get people to turn out to vote. It seems like the most important race to a lot of people is the presidential race. So every 4 years you have a really good turnout. But we need to get more people involved in the April elections. Your municipal election is what affects you mostly in your hometown. Your school boards, your city council, those races affect you more than the presidential race. So I think they're very important. We went out to the schools and we did voter drives. We can get people registered, but the hard part is to get them to turn out. So we did numerous registrations all over some of the like Lincoln University campus and Blair Oaks, and we got all those people entered, and now we have to try to get them to turn out. Unfortunately, the county clerk does not have any money in their budget for advertising, so the community would have to try to do something to try to push that out. You know, I try to get on the social media and try to, show people that, the times and dates and everything. I try to inform people of that, but other than that, there's not much that I can do financially as far as advertising it or anything. We go out and we try to get people registered and try to get them out to vote and tell them it's important, but, they don't always listen to me, so.
Ann, same question.
Free rides to the polls would be good. I think Jeff Tram is trying to do that this year. Maybe get our younger people more involved. I think this forum is a good way to get people informed about the candidates, and sample ballots are good. People would get those and read them ahead of time before they get to the polls. Encourage people to get out and vote. It's like a lot of times the April is the least voted election, yes, and presidentials are usually the favorite, but need to get people involved in the August, the primaries, and it's hard because, like Steve said, you can register them, but then getting them out to vote is the problem. So informing voters, I guess, would be the best way.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to begin our closing statements. You each will have 1 minute, and so we'll start with Ann.
I want to thank News and Tribune for this opportunity. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and listening. I'm ready to put my 33 years of service and experience back to work for Cole County. I appreciate your vote November 6th. Please get out and vote.
All right, thank you. Steve, same.
I want to thank you also for having the forum tonight. I also want to thank everybody that supported me during my campaign and election. It's been a great 4 years. It was sad for us when we had to close Blackwell's Garage. They'd been in business in Jeff City for 90 years. All my wife's family were involved in it, and it was a sad day. But I'm grateful that I was elected, and I've really enjoyed it. It's really a great job, and I appreciate all the support that everybody's given me. I have an excellent staff. I get compliments on them every day. People call or come in and say, "Oh, they were treated very nice and they were very knowledgeable." So, all my election judges, they're great people. They really work hard. They have minimal pay, and it's a long day for them. So we appreciate all of them. Please vote for me. I really do enjoy it. Thank you.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming here, answering questions. We recognize it's probably not the most comfortable format.
It's a rough start.
But we do appreciate your willingness to try to explain what you would do as county clerk. So at this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break so we can get ready for our prosecuting attorneys forum.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
It's a little nerve-wracking at first, but we got through it.
do. Do you
All
care
right.
to some water?
Yes.
I was like, I'm getting up here. Good to see you. Good job.
Oh, they got ceiling fans. Do you have one down there?
Lucky you.
They knew they were putting the old gal over here, so they knew I'd need the fan. Right there. Test.
Sure. No notes or anything. You can take notes, but don't.
We're clean. We're clean.
Second is make sure the microphone's Yep. I mean, some of them are really struggling back there. So.
Sure.
And I had had folks in some forums say, "We can't hear you." So
Okay.
Sure.
you get called out like that, or so.
All right.
We'll get started in just a second.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary.
Is that your sister?
It is, yeah.
She looks quite a bit like you.
I hear that a lot. And then my brother, it's funny, growing up, my brother and I, everyone used to ask if we were twins. We're about 2 years apart. And now we get the question every once in a while. I'm like, are you kidding? She's a lot younger than me.
Oh, okay. And they
She's,
ask if you and she are twins?
Every once in a while
Okay.
we get that one. Not often. She often gets asked, she and my mom often get asked if they're sisters, but
That's nice for your mom.
I know, right?
I love that one. There's a woman I take yoga with, and her daughter takes class, and I
Yeah.
thought they were sisters, but it's a mother and daughter. So that's pretty cool.
It's always nice and flattering
Yeah.
for the mom, right?
Absolutely.
Do you do that downtown here, or on Dunkland? Is that where the yoga studio is here?
Yeah, the one downtown.
I used to do hot yoga every once in a while when I was in school up at Columbia, just as a recovery day from the gym, and I thought I sweat just doing a workout. That stuff is unreal.
I don't do the hot yoga. I just do the regular because
Yeah.
I get hot enough.
Yeah, right. Well, and they heat that. The worst thing about that, they heat it up. It's like 105, and it's not a dry heat.
No.
It's like,
And I keep thinking, if they heat the room up to 105 and it's midsummer,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I want to be downstairs where the air conditioning,
yeah.
having that just blow on me. And I still work up, still plenty warm.
Still be feeling it. Definitely.
Thumbs up. All right, so welcome back. Welcome to tonight's forum for Cole County Prosecuting Attorney. As I mentioned in the previous forums, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum at the beginning of the evening. They'll be given 1 minute for an opening statement, and then I'll be asking a series of questions. So let me introduce the candidates for tonight's forum. To my left is Deirdre D.K. Herner. She's founder of Herner & Associates, a Jefferson City law firm. She's been a senior staff member in the offices of Missouri Governors Mel Carnahan and Bob Holden and Illinois Lieutenant Governor Sheila Simon. She's the Democratic candidate for the seat. To my right is Locke Thompson. He worked in the Special Prosecutions Unit at the Missouri Attorney General's office. Previous to that, he was assistant prosecutor in Jasper County. He defeated incumbent Mark Richardson in the August primary, and he is a Republican candidate for the seat. The order for the opening and closing statements was determined before the forum, and DK drew the first lot, so she will be given 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you very much. First question, can everybody hear me, or am I too loud? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have been asked a number of times why I am running for Cole County Prosecuting Attorney. And when asked that question, I have answered, I'm doing that to apply the law fairly and to keep our community safe. So I am determined to go after violent criminals and drug traffickers. But at the same time, I am most interested in looking at alternatives to incarceration. Alternatives like our treatment courts, the ones that we have established here in Cole County, for juveniles and for veterans, and for those who suffer from addiction and mental illness. And I am committed to being nonpartisan when it comes to prosecuting those who violate or those accused of public corruption. And as a point of personal privilege, I'd like to introduce my husband, Captain Chuck Geiger, U.S. Navy retired, who served on aircraft carriers for 30 years, primarily flying jet fighters. And he knows, as I, about putting service above self.
Thank you. Locke?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Locke Thompson. I am, as Gary said, the Republican candidate for Cole County Prosecutor. I grew up here in Jeff City, graduated from Helias High School, went on to Mizzou for undergrad and for law school, and as Gary said, worked in the Jasper County Prosecutor's Office, where I actually ran their treatment court dockets. I was in charge of the mental health court and of their veterans court programs, and then went on to the Attorney General's office in the Special Prosecutions Unit, where I handled sexually violent predators, public corruption crimes, and a lot of crimes against children. So what I'm really looking forward to here in Cole County is to bring that experience I've gained home to the community where I grew up and to help make Cole County a safer place for us all to be.
All right, thank you. So let's get started with the questions. We're going to start with Locke. In one of the News Tribune election stories, DK suggested many folks don't understand what the prosecutor's office does. How would you explain to a voter the role and purpose of the prosecuting attorney?
I would say, to put it pretty simply, that the role of the prosecutor is to do justice on each and every case. Your law enforcement agencies come to you with a case referral, and you make that determination as to whether or not charges are going to be filed. You make the determination as to what charge will be filed and what the appropriate steps are from there, what the proper punishment, if any, will be, what kind of maybe diversion does that person need. And it's all about applying the law fairly to everybody.
All right, DK, same question.
Yes, and I agree with Locke in those, all of those issues that he raised. But the one thing that I think many people don't realize is that the Cole County Prosecutor's Office has a very unique role and responsibility in terms of fighting public corruption. So not only in terms of dealing with public corruption, public officials who are located in Cole County, but those who are in statewide office. Those are referred to the Cole County prosecutor, as are ethics violations. And I think it's important to add that statewide perspective as well as the local perspective to the office of the prosecutor.
All right. Next question, we'll start with DK. Reader Stephanie Clark asks this question. Neither of you have extensive courtroom experience as a prosecutor. How many criminal cases have you prosecuted in the past, and should that be a concern for Cole County voters? Why or why not?
I have not prosecuted criminal cases, and I don't think that that necessarily is a concern for the residents of Cole County, because the prosecutor's office is not a one-man shop. It's a prosecutor's office, and there are 22 persons who are employed in that office, and based on my experience, my managerial experience over some 40 years, I think that you can work with the people who work in the office to determine who is best suited to prosecute the crime in the courtroom.
All right, Locke, same question.
Well, I would dispute that. I mean, I worked in Jasper County where I surely saw over 1,000 criminal cases in court during my time there. Worked at the Attorney General's office where I was going to court constantly prosecuting cases. So I wouldn't say that I don't have a lot of courtroom experience. Certainly I'm younger, I'll admit that, but that's what I've been doing for my entire career to this point, and it's something I plan to continue doing for quite some time. As to the point that it's not a one-man shop, that's accurate. However, you know, there's already been quite a bit of turnover since the primary election in that office, and particularly with attorney staff choosing to leave. And so it's going to be very important that somebody in that office, the elected prosecutor, while it's generally an administrative role, I'm looking at probably for the first 6 months to a year, there's a very good chance that the elected prosecutor is going to have to be going into court regularly and taking a docket and understand how that works and how that runs.
Okay, well, let's circle back to the question, though,
Sure.
because the question was how many criminal cases have you prosecuted? And
Sure.
you're not saying that you've prosecuted thousands of cases, correct?
No, not thousands.
Thousands of criminal
No.
cases. So how many criminal cases have you?
I could go back and look at my file from Jasper County. I know it was in the hundreds that I had by the time I left there. Overall, probably saw thousands or 1,000 or so in court on a daily basis, not on a daily basis, but during my total time there. At the Attorney General's office, caseloads are a lot smaller there. I think the largest my caseload ever got was somewhere around 25 to 30 cases at a time going around the state. So.
Okay, well, again, I'm going to clarify because at the Republican primary,
Sure.
I believe it was a
That-
point-blank question.
Sure.
How many cases had you been in a courtroom as prosecutor, and it was 8, I believe you
The
said?
question on that was jury trials, and that's, to me, that means something different.
Okay,
Prosecuting, the jury trial is the last step in the criminal process. Just because you don't reach a jury trial doesn't mean you haven't prosecuted a case.
okay. So next question will go with Locke. Is your intent to hire your own staff if you're elected, or use the existing staff?
Well, as I said just a moment ago, there already has been a little bit of turnover up there. I am going to have to bring in some people. To the extent that I can, I would certainly like to keep staff around, particularly support staff who have been there for a very long time, know the way things work there. To the extent that I can minimize turnover and any problems with transition, I would like to do so.
All right. DK?
So I would say that I am uncertain about turnover in the existing prosecutor's office because I am not personally privy to that information. So if people are saying that there is turnover in the office, I would say that's little more than hearsay. But my approach to working with people in an office, in an existing office, is I sit down with each one of the individuals. I learn their strengths, what strengths they bring to the office to make the office successful, to take the burden of questioning off the person and put it onto the office. I think there is value to institutional knowledge. I am aware that there are investigators in the office, there are victims advocates in the office, there is a person from the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center in the office, and as Alok said, there are support staff. And so I think it would be very wise to have it during the transition period. And in my experience, you have a transition period between the date of the election and the date the person, the public official, takes office. And so I think that would be the time to interview the people and to look at people's various strengths and to ask them how they feel about working in the current prosecutor's office, the one that's coming up.
All right, thank you. DK, this next question will begin with you. Reader Sue Gibson asks, recognizing that the prosecuting attorney's office runs as a team effort, how would you propose to rely on staff, both current and new hires?
Okay, as I like to say again, I have maybe 25, 30 years of managerial experience working with staffs, some of whom I had to hire, so in the Lieutenant Governor's office that you talked about earlier. I went from a staff of 0 to 30 to address the programs within 1 month's time. That was between Inauguration Day and December 1st. And I matched the skill level of the people that I hired, all of whom were new hires. But I hired them as a team with the Lieutenant Governor, interviewing all of the folks. And so from that perspective, I think I have the experience of dealing with brand new staff coming in as well as working with current staff, because when I went to, I was Drury University's Vice President for Alumni and Development. There were approximately 30 people in that office, all of whom had worked there for maybe 20 years. And I worked with the existing staff so that we together identified, again, what we needed to do to be successful as an office. And then we went through and rewrote job descriptions matching people's skill levels to what work we needed to accomplish.
All right, Locke, same question.
Yeah, you know, I would certainly want to sit down with everyone and figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of the existing staff are. For anyone new who comes in, same situation, and just kind of build my team that way. And I know at the Attorney General's office, attorneys were constantly bouncing ideas off of each other on certain cases, certain issues that would arise in cases, and that's kind of how I've always operated with my coworkers, is just talking things out and figuring out best strategy, things like that. And as far as how I want them to operate, I guess I have to get in there and see how they currently operate and see exactly what it is I would want to change about that, if anything.
All right. So a follow-up question to both of you. The previous two forums sort of discussed this idea, whether you as an elected official are the manager of that department, or if you're an active leader in that part, boots on the ground. Okay? So in that regards, if you're elected prosecuting attorney, do you perceive yourself that you will be the face in the courtroom representing Cole County, or will it be more likely your staff members doing it? And what would determine that? Locke, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, the caseload is a pretty big determining factor there, and there's just no way for one attorney to handle every single case on every single day in Cole County. So it would be a number of faces in the courtroom, certainly. And I'm sure that I'll be in there at some point. I'm sure that others will be in there at other times. To me, certainly there will be administrative duties that go along with being the elected prosecutor. I don't anticipate that I'll have personally hundreds of open cases like I did in Jasper County as a boots on the ground, as you said, assistant, but certainly want to stay involved and continue working cases with the team.
DK?
Yes, sir. And at some point, I would see myself taking an active role in the courtroom, but based on how I've operated over the years, not until I had done my homework and until I was certain I was thoroughly prepared to present the evidence that was necessary to reach a conviction or to have the court find that is a criminal offense. So part one, yeah, at some point, yes, I do see myself in certain instances after I've done my homework. Part two is, do I see myself as an administrator? I've been a successful administrator for many, many years, managing staffs of 30 to 50 people, identifying goals, objectives, actions, and tactics to make the office successful as a team, not doing a top-down, I'm going to feed it to you through your throat and you're going to buy into this, but we work together as a team to identify those things that will make the office successful. And the other thing I think that's important as an administrator is that you have a budget. Now, I have operated budgets of millions of dollars and allocated the resources out of those millions of dollars that were available for the office in order to make the best use of the resource and match it to the task to be accomplished. And having done so, managed and worked with folks in the office in order to reduce the amount of public dollars that we had to use in order to do our job effectively, but it was by being a creative manager of the staff resources I had and working with folks to get the budget right.
All right. All right, DK, next question will start with you. And let me preface it by saying you both entered in the race, and my presumption as a voter is you believe that things need to be done differently in the prosecuting attorney's office than they currently are. So while I realize you don't know the staff, you've not been in the office, I'm going to hold you to this. Why did you get into the race? What do you think you would be doing differently if you're elected prosecutor than the current prosecuting attorney's office? So we start with DK.
Okay. Cole County courts have established drug courts, veteran courts, DWI courts, and a program that's called a pre-trial release program, and it enables those who are accused of a nonviolent crime to return to their community until such time as their court date is held. And I don't think that the current prosecutor has taken advantage of those programs to the maximum they could be, or explored them, both with the court systems and with stakeholders in the community. It seems like the current prosecutor's office is not open and transparent, and so by working with stakeholders, by working with community leaders, and by working with those in the community who probably know a whole lot more about rape or domestic violence or child enforcement, bringing them in, and so being more inclusive. And I think that's the probably the defining thing between the current prosecutor's office and myself, being inclusive and being transparent.
All right. Locke, same question.
Sure. Well, as I said throughout the primary, and I still say today, I think the biggest issue facing this community is drug use. And part of what I did in Jasper County was working with those treatment courts, specifically the mental health court program and the veterans court program. We do not have a mental health court program here in Cole County. That's something I would really, really like to get established and do so as quickly as possible. 80% of drug users also have an underlying mental health condition, and so what you see a lot of the time are individuals self-medicating who end up in prison who maybe don't really need to be there. They're not bad people, they're sick, and that can go a long way, I believe, toward addressing the overcrowding that we're seeing in the state prison systems and in our county jails around the state. Additionally, I think that there has been maybe not the best charging decisions always being made in the office, and I understand that, not every case is perfect and you're not going to get it right every single time, but there seems to have been a pattern currently of either undercharging on some offenses or overcharging on others, and just making sure that we're going through the cases carefully and concisely and getting the call right the first go around so that you're not dismissing cases down the road because you can't meet your burden of proof.
All right. Next question, we'll start with Locke. At times, there's a substantial backlog of cases in the circuit court system. Does the prosecuting attorney's office have a role in addressing that backlog? If so, how?
Certainly. There are a lot of factors that go into why we have a backlog of criminal cases. Criminal justice system tends to move pretty slowly as it is, but there are certainly things the prosecutor's office can do to speed up the process. Number one, specific to this county, is cases were not being taken in front of Judge Beadham. That is something I intend to change to make sure that all 3 circuit divisions are being utilized to the full extent that they can. Also, getting discovery out on time to defense attorneys is vital a lot of the time in getting either someone a guilty plea or getting the case resolved in some other way. What you see a lot are defense attorneys who go into court, they don't have the discovery, they don't know what the police report says, and so when they go to visit their client in the county jail and their client says, well, what am I looking at? Defense attorney can't really tell them, and it might be weeks or months down the road before you ever really get that discovery. And so getting that discovery, and by discovery I mean all the evidence that you as the prosecutor possess, getting that to the defense in a timely fashion, it only helps speed up the process and helps both sides.
DK, same question.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree that it is very important for the prosecutor's office to get all of the discovery information to the defenders early. I think that will help the backlog. I think it will help the backlog if we support the public defender's system as well, because if I'm a prosecutor, I can't do my job if the public defender can't do his or her job. And so, to have established that kind of working relationship, I agree, as Locke said as well, that the cases were not being heard by Judge Beadham. Only 2 of the judges in Cole County Circuit Court were involved in cases coming down from the prosecutor. And I think part of the backlog stems as well from charging and placing people in incarceration for lower level crimes instead of focusing on the violent crimes and the drug trafficking on which we should focus. And by bringing everybody in to sit in jail or charging everyone, you create a backlog.
All right. Next question, I'll begin with DK. What is the biggest criminal problem you perceive as facing Cole County, and what can you do as a prosecuting attorney to address the problem?
Okay. I understand that there are 2 very big problems in Cole County. The first being drug trafficking, and there is a drug problem in Cole County, and it is not isolated in one part of Jefferson City. It is kind of all over the community, and I think we need to be honest with the citizens about the drug problems that we have in our community. The second problem that I have been made aware of is domestic violence, and I read it in your paper this morning in the police reports. There was a domestic violence call that went to the sheriffs on, I think it was Monday, and then the same address, it was a domestic violence call made to the Jefferson City case the following day. And so we are not paying sufficient attention to instances of domestic violence in our community. And I think that, again, bringing in people who are experts in that field, we can work with survivors of domestic violence and try to properly prosecute those crimes and not see that the sheriff and the police are dealing with the same issue one day right after the other. Same address, same perpetrator.
All right. Locke, same question.
Sure. As I said earlier, I think drugs are the biggest issue we currently face locally and probably nationwide, especially with the opioid epidemic going on right now. And again, part of my plan for that is to properly utilize treatment courts, get that mental health program started, and at the same time, you have to crack down on the dealers, on the violent crime that often comes along with related to drug dealing, trafficking, things like that. As far as domestic violence, I agree that that's a huge issue. It's a huge issue everywhere. We certainly had a lot of it in Jasper County and certainly saw a lot of it around the state in my time at the AG's office. And they're very tricky cases. They can often be difficult cases because you end up in a situation where the victim is scared to pursue, and rightly so often if they keep going back to the perpetrator. And I'm thinking of one specific instance in Jasper County where an individual kept coming in, it seemed like every other month, with a case against their significant other, and the case would come in, and like clockwork, the next week the victim would come in and file the drop charge paperwork, didn't want to pursue, and eventually it got to the point where they came in one last time on the final case, and we said no. Sorry, at the end of the day, you may not want to go forward with this case, but we as the prosecutors have discretion to move forward with it. If you don't want to be a part of it, that's fine, but we're going forward with this case either way because that's the right thing to do.
All right. Next question, we start with Locke. Reader Stephanie Clark asks, how do you see the relationship between the prosecuting attorney's office and law enforcement, whether that be JCPD, Sheriff's Department, LU Police, Capitol Police, in terms of reducing crime and keeping violent criminals off the streets?
Well, certainly you're always working as a team with the law enforcement agencies. They bring you the case and you make that decision on whether or not to file. And I was actually speaking to the Police Officers Association last night, and I made the point that, I can't do my job as a prosecutor without you guys doing your work and bringing me the case. And at the end of the day, your work doesn't really mean an awful lot if I, as the prosecutor, can't close the deal and get the guilty conviction. So it's really all about working together as a team, trying to get all your ducks lined up in a row. As far as the evidence goes, that's especially where the officers and law enforcement agencies are vital to your case. And then you, as the prosecutor, you have to make that determination on what's appropriate and what's not as far as what sentence.
All right, same question, DK.
I think that the prosecutor has a duty to work with law enforcement, but when it comes to trying violent criminals or, trying to reduce the amount of crime, that there has to be, it's a two-way street between the prosecutor's office and law enforcement. And so the law enforcement officials need to be, I guess for lack of a better word, educated on the amount and type of evidence that a prosecutor has to have to pursue a case successfully in a court of law. And so I think it is incumbent on the prosecutor to provide sort of a training program or materials to the law enforcement officials that said, we're in this together, but if you want me to do this, you have to help me do it, and this is what we need to prove up the case. And I think we do that in such a way so that they're fully informed, but law enforcement is informed without the prosecutor trying to take away law enforcement's discretion, because they too have discretion too when it comes to making an arrest.
All right. Next question, we'll start with DK. Both of you expressed support for alternative courts. What's working in the current system and what isn't, and what do you believe we should be doing to improve or expand these courts?
Okay, I have studied the alternative court programs that we have, and each of them have some mental health component involved with the drugs, the DWI, and the veterans courts. But I think that we need to take better advantage of the screening system and the screening system for enrolling persons in those various treatment court programs. But we also have to, as the prosecutor, have a willingness to refer people to those programs. And so, so I think that, it is incumbent upon the prosecutor to work with the person who has committed a crime and say, this option is available for you. How can we get you to this various option?
All right. Locke?
Yeah, while I was in Jasper County and working with their treatment courts, that was actually my role, was to screen them, at least from the prosecutor's end, go through criminal history, things like that, and determine whether or not we felt that that individual was a good fit for the program. Also, they also have to go through stuff with probation and parole and social services, things like that, before, we put someone in that program. I think the biggest issue we've seen here is just a reluctance from the current prosecutor's office to really embrace and utilize these programs. I think that you need to really target individuals who are not high risk for violent reoffending, who are not dealing, but people who are committing these lower level felonies, typically, where it's pretty obvious that either they've got just an addiction issue or they're stealing to feed their habit or something like that.
All right. Last question. We'll begin with Locke.
Sure.
What would you bring to the office that DK would not?
Really, it comes down to the experience I've gained as a prosecutor in Jasper County, my experience working with these treatment court programs that I'm adamant about pushing more here, the experience I've gained around the state as a special prosecutor on some really difficult and disturbing cases, and that, at the end of the day, I think is my big advantage. Going into a prosecutor's office, knowing what it takes to prosecute a case, my familiarity with the criminal code, and just my ability to spot good prosecutors and create a good team around me.
All right. DK, same question. What would you bring to the office that Locke would not?
Managerial and budgeting experience from years of doing that, bringing through budgeting, allocating the resources of the office of prosecutor to the people who work in the prosecutor's office to achieve the best outcomes. The managerial is sitting down with a staff of 20 people, 22 people to, teams don't just show up. You have to create a team. And so, you have to, as a manager, work with people and to bring the best out in them. You're not entitled to cooperation and trust. You have to earn cooperation and trust from the people you work with. And so I've managed to do that over a number of years. And I think I bring that to the office, that managerial and budgeting experience. I also bring legislative experience. I know what it takes to get good laws passed. I've seen good laws written and I've seen bad laws written. And I know that just about 3 years ago, I think, they completely rewrote the criminal code in the state legislature. And so I think that they have now recognized there are some problems that they had, and so I think it would be, it would well serve the citizens of the state of Missouri and Cole County that through the legislative process, we really focus on how the criminal code's written and what its strengths and weaknesses are.
All right. Okay, so that concludes our questions for you tonight. At this point, I'll offer you an opportunity to have a closing statement. We'll begin with DK.
So I'd just like to say that about the majority of my 40 years of experience has been as a public servant. And if I'm elected to serve as the Cole County prosecutor, I will continue to be a public servant. And I will bring transparency to the office, and I am committing to keep the public who elected this person informed of what goes on in the prosecutor's office. And I also think that I would fairly apply my prosecutorial discretion. And so I think I have a bit of maturity and wisdom that I bring to that discretion, having exercised it over a number of years, realizing that who, what, and when is charged with a crime has a whole lot more impact than just on the accused. It is his or her family and his or her community, and I think those are extremely important things that we look at when we serve the public and we have a duty to the people of Cole County.
Thank you. Locke?
Sure. Well, first, Gary, thank you, and thanks to the News Tribune staff for putting this event on for us this evening, and thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. It's always great to see people engaged in the community and who care about who they elect. You know, as I said, I bring, you know, a lot of varied experience in prosecution back home to Cole County. This is where I grew up. I care about this place. This is something I plan to do for a while, and just helping make Cole County safer again. You know, I don't like seeing shooting on the news any more than anybody else does, and it's gotten worse over the past few years. There's no denying that. I'm just ready, eager, and excited to get back out here and make a difference.
All right. Well, we appreciate you both coming tonight, answering our questions, and we wish you both luck in the election. At this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back with our Associate Circuit Judge candidates.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Maybe they're just more experienced, but at the same time, they did a good job speaking. Good.
Which candidate before us wrote on the cup, but I took that one serious.
Okay. Looks like they marked it. One thing they did tell us before you got here is that these mics are live and it's recording at all times.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Oh, good plan. That way you don't get poisoned by whoever put the water out.
Oh, no, I didn't even think about it.
I'm just teasing.
There's still some in there. Usually by the time you're last, it's gone.
The only thing with going last is that you're not going to be very many people.
I know. It's like how many people can clear out.
Quinn actually said, part of the reason I asked Anderson is Quinn actually said they were all in the same group and said that they were just and soccer kids, horses, she's taking girlfriend and work with her and all that stuff. We're all it's because we teased Quinn's date, saying that I was glad that she found the dress that matched his tie. Although I think Debbie wouldn't got the ties. Oh yeah, so
So, let's be honest, the males are just accessories. The females. It's changed since we were in school. So we pinned the flower on, we took pictures of the front porch with the front door, and we went to the band dance.
they had fun.
It is fun.
Steve's staying around.
Good, how are you?
Good. Can you turn the air up? No way.
I can turn it up. I can.
You got a fan over
I know.
there.
I know how. Yeah, the fan was on when I got there.
It's right there.
I'm not in charge of the forum. I could do it. I know how to turn the air on.
I thought about turning the air on. Give them out the train.
I know how to do it.
Yeah, you said you were in charge. Very good. 65.
I do it every morning when I walk in.
Oh, you're not? Okay, so.
That's my drawer. Oh, you can. It's the mayor's drawer.
Okay.
So what you do
I don't think that's really a problem for Galen or I.
as the night goes on, I think all these kids cranky. So they might call you. So speak up. You have notes and you can make notes.
Yep.
Plenty.
Yep.
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 So
Can somebody do that?
other than that,
Really? Oh, Ted? Oh, sorry. I wasn't here for his whole thing.
confirm or deny.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just guessing.
So anyway, we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Thank you.
I don't know if the crowd gets cranky or slap happy.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to get started again. So welcome to tonight's candidate forum for Cole County as Associate Circuit Judge. Prior to tonight, the candidates were advised the rules of the forum. They're going to be given 1 minute for an opening statement, and then I'll be asking a series of questions for the candidates. So let's just jump right into it, and we're going to introduce the candidates. So to my left is Cotton Walker. He's been serving as municipal judge for Jefferson City since 2011. He was previously municipal judge in Russellville. He's a Republican candidate for the seat. To my right is Galen Carver. She's a partner in the Jefferson City law firm of Carver and Michael. She was a law clerk for the Missouri Supreme Court Justice Mike Wolf and an assistant prosecuting attorney for former Cole County prosecuting attorney Richard Callahan. She's a Democratic candidate for the seat. The order for the opening and closing statements were determined before the forum. We're going to begin with Cotton. He has 1 minute for his opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. Good evening. I'm Judge Cotton Walker. I have practiced law in Central Missouri since 1991 when I graduated from University of Missouri Law School. And I've been a judge since 1994 when I was first appointed as judge in Russellville, serving that community, as well as serving as interim or appointed judge in Holt Summit, Jefferson City, and Lowman during the years I've served as judge. 1994 is more important for a different reason. That was the year I married my wife, Deborah Massengale Walker, who's here. While it may be long forgotten when I was first appointed judge, I will not forget the anniversary. So I appreciate the opportunity as I've gone through the campaign to talk to citizens throughout Cole County, going door to door and going to the community events that we enjoy attending every year. And thank you for the opportunity tonight, Gary, and the News Tribune.
Thank you. Galen.
So I'm Galen Rich Carver, and I grew up here in Jefferson City and graduated from Jefferson City High School. And can everybody hear me? Okay. And I am a partner right now at Carver and Michael, where I am continuing to practice law. I have both, I practice in both the criminal area as well as the civil area, and do a wide range of civil practice, both from family law to probate, rent and possession, that type of, and various other type of civil areas. And then before that, I was an assistant prosecuting attorney here in Cole County. And then before I went to law school at St. Louis University, where I met my husband, and we moved back here then after law school, and we have 2 children who attend Jefferson City Public Schools. One is in high school, and the other one is at Simonson. So I want to thank the News Tribune for hosting us, and also want to thank everybody for being here today.
All right. Well, let's jump into it and get started. We're going to start with Galen. The Associate Circuit Court handles thousands of cases annually, both criminal and civil. What background do you have that would help you deal with the volume and diversity of cases you would face?
So, a little more than half of those cases are criminal, and those criminal cases include all levels of misdemeanors and all levels of felonies, even up to A felonies, because if they don't go through the grand jury, they all start in associate level first for there to be a preliminary hearing or a preliminary determination that there's probable cause that a crime has been committed. These are exactly the kind of cases that I handled from the very beginning, and both in law school as a Rule 13 certified law student, and then also as an assistant prosecuting attorney, where I basically kind of learned the trade actually in front of Judge Sodergren in associate court, doing bench trials, preliminary hearings, arguing on motions in limine, motions to suppress, and then I also did jury trials. So being able to do jury trials in particular on the criminal side, both from the prosecutors representing the state, but then also in private practice representing individuals or defendants that are charged with a crime, being able to do jury trials on both sides and understanding rules of evidence and being able to understand and quickly determine whether or not something should be suppressed. These are the kind of skills I think that I have that are going to be needed in the Associate Circuit Court, in particular with criminal. Then when you talk about civil cases too, which is a little less than half those cases, all the types of cases that would appear not only in associate courts but also in circuit courts, I've done a lot of them in all different ranges, and I have a wide range of legal experience from having done a pretty broad area. There's some areas, of course, that I don't know, some particular civil areas, and I think that what makes a strong judge is one that is a judge that's willing to say, gee, I don't know about this particular aspect, and go out and learn about it. But I've done everything from family law, guardianships, adoptions, even initiative petition ballot challenges.
All right. Cotton, same question.
Thank you. Yes, the Associate Circuit Court was properly defined by Galen as to what the caseload is, and as far as the caseload in the criminal division especially, the experience that I have in municipal court and especially in the Jefferson City Municipal Court, we handle about 10 to 11,000 cases a year in this division of the 19th Judicial Circuit, and it does take more than just knowing how to handle the case from the other side of the bench to know the management responsibilities of a judge, that is responsibility for the court staff, and then the role between making sure that the citizens understand an independent judge has a role between the prosecutor and the defense, and that the judicial branch needs to be strong and independent in managing that docket. We've developed some tools in the municipal division to handle that type of caseload, and we do it in a docket that only has 1 day a week court. It's a long Wednesday usually, but and then we have added in the last year on every other Friday to help specific types of cases, those being licensing cases. My trial lawyer background is extensive, as is Galen's as far as handling other civil cases and criminal cases. I've had jury trials, I've taken cases up to the Court of Appeals and all the way to the Supreme Court of Missouri. I feel confident that that background also helps me to manage a caseload such as you will in the Associate Division.
All right. So a follow-up question to both of you in this regard. So for the layperson, they may not understand if you're faced with a criminal or a civil case that you may need to do research. So what goes into doing the research for a case? Cotton. Well,
from the standpoint of the judge or a practicing attorney, I'd say that different judges have different styles on that, with what research needs to be done on individual cases. If there is a type of case that you're not sure what the law is, often you rely on the local bar to know what, to point you to the answer and know what that law is. And in fact, as officers of the court, they have the duty to notify the court of any relevant law to the individual fact circumstance. But absolutely, even though in the 19th Judicial Circuit, there have been times when there have been law clerks or interns available to the judges in the circuit, the judge does have to take the time, sometimes after the evidence is all heard, to make sure that the right law is applied to the fact circumstance. Jury trials are a little bit different because you're more engaged in making sure the jury knows what their job is and the law that is applied to the individual facts circumstance. And so you're probably coming into a jury trial with a little better idea of what law applies in that situation, so you may not have to research after you hear the facts. But there are cases even on the municipal bench when even if there's closing argument from effective counsel on behalf of the prosecution and the defense, I still take the case under advisement or ask for briefing by the attorneys to clarify what they believe the issue of law is as relevant to the facts in an individual case.
All right. Galen, same question.
So there's two basic areas of law. One is statutory, and the other would be case law, because case law from the appellate courts, as well as from the Supreme Court, and then, of course, the federal courts, these are what we call precedent. And so you start by looking at the statutes and reading the statutes, and then you would look and research the cases that where other decisions have already been made that are similar or have similar aspects to whatever the issue is that you're researching. Now, like everything today, it's all electronic, and so now we don't have to use the big law libraries with all the books to look them up that way. We can actually do a search on Westlaw, LexisNexis, and you do the search, and all the information will come up, and then you can go through and figure out what it is that you need to know. So, like, this is, like, for example, what an attorney would do if I'm needing to legally brief a particular issue on behalf of my client to present to the judge. And the other side would do the same thing. So as a judge, if it's an area that I really don't feel 100% familiar with, I would have access to the case law, the research, et cetera, and I would do my own research too, just to make sure that the information that both of the attorneys have given me, not that I don't trust them, but it's you can always make a case say something that you want it to support your position. So I would want to look myself to make sure that this is what that aspect of the law is, if I'm not 100% familiar with it. And using the two legal briefs that were provided maybe by both of the attorneys as sort of a starting point. Okay, I'm going to look at this case, I'm going to look up this case, I'm going to read each of these two separate cases that have been cited myself so that I can understand exactly what the law is on that issue.
All right. Thank you. All right. Next question. We'll start with Galen. Reader Sue Gibson asks, describe your experience with jury trials. How many of you argued, and what types of cases?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think that jury trials is something like most attorneys that are litigators that practice in the civil arena will say that most of their cases are probably bench trials. And bench trial means that you're trying your case in front of just the judge without a jury. In criminal, now in most civil cases, they always have the right to a jury, but a lot of times they don't do that, and so most civil cases are going to be just in front of an actual judge who makes the decision. But criminal cases, including misdemeanor cases, the defendant always has the right to a jury. And so the ability to be able to understand doing a jury trial, because it is a lot more complicated than a regular bench trial. And so I would say I've probably had, 15 to 20 jury trials, in criminal jury trials. Some of those have been, probably a little more than half were when I was in the prosecuting attorney's office, and then the other half has been when I was as a defense attorney in private practice representing somebody who's charged with the crime. Not all cases go to jury trial. I think the percentage is probably about 10% of criminal cases will go to actual jury trial, because usually something's worked out before then, or decisions are determined based upon motions in limine or motions to suppress, all of which I have done in court. And so the ability to have, the fact that I have the experience of being both a prosecutor and representing the state, as well as being a private attorney representing defendant on the other side, I think is a very important aspect that's going to help me as an associate judge, where most of those cases will be misdemeanors, some will be felonies, but at least at the preliminary hearing stage, but the misdemeanor defendants have the right to a jury trial if they want.
Same question for me.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
Let me make sure we've answered the question completely. How many have you argued?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
Did you answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just checking.
I said
That's
I think
fine.
I've had about 20,
It's been a
at least
long
20.
night.
I mean,
Okay.
it's hard to.
All right. It's all good. Cotton, yes, it's
Yeah.
your turn.
So, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. I was just making sure you didn't skip me on that one. I've actually had about 15, or I probably had about 24 jury trials in my legal practice. Most of those were civil jury trials. Being a civil practitioner, and because I've been a judge, I don't practice criminal defense anymore. I've had attorneys work for me through the last 20 years who've practiced criminal defense and had jury trials. But my jury trial experience has ranged from trying cases in Cole County, in the federal courts here in the Western District, as well as in St. Louis, and in some of the surrounding counties, as well as in Greene County, where I started my law practice right out of law school for a couple of years. And Galen's right about that, having that experience, because as I briefly mentioned, when you're talking about researching cases, when you take a case to a jury trial, every lawyer involved, the judge, the plaintiff or defendant, or prosecution and defendant attorneys, they are usually well versed on the laws that are relevant to that case, and it's actually very exciting. That and taking cases to the Court of Appeals, when even though you're sitting before a bench of Court of Appeals judges that you think is very learned and experienced, you know, if you're involved in a jury trial or you're involved in a Court of Appeals case, you know, as the attorney, you know as much about the law and the facts as anybody else in the room. And so that, I believe Galen's right about that. That having some jury trial experience in both criminal and civil is important for a judge to have that background.
All right. Thank you. Cotton, we'll start with you on this question. Due to the high volume of cases, there are times when a backlog exists. What steps would you take to try to limit the amount of backlog in the court?
Well, at the municipal level, state court administrators doesn't look at us for time standards. There are time standards that apply to the circuit divisions, and to some degree, my understanding is that the 19th Judicial Circuit's gotten a little away from that for whatever reasons, not maybe towing the line so much on those time standards that are set out for cases to go to trial, civil and criminal. And so you do have to take some measures. And what I've done in municipal court is we have law days, if the attorneys are involved, law days once a month. And at those law days, I press counsel as much as I can, both for the prosecution and for the defense. I'm pointing over here because usually the prosecutor's sitting over here in this facility. But and the judge does have a role in the interest of justice to make sure that evidence doesn't spoil, witnesses don't die or move away. A police officer who might be a witness in a municipal case or a felony in Cole County or a misdemeanor in Cole County may change jobs or move away. So you do have a job in keeping the wheels of justice moving, and so there are ways to do that, and one of them is to press attorneys on that and pay attention to the time that a case is managed. The other thing you can do is, and it's something that I've done with adding the every other Friday docket in this court, is I just take certain cases that take a little time, that you want to spend a little time with the parties, the defendant, or whether they're in this court, they're usually pro se, not always, but that means they represent themselves. But take those dockets and make specific dockets for those types of cases so that you can move faster with your bigger dockets that are usually the arraignment or the pretrial hearing dockets. So,
all right. Galen, same question.
So my experience with Judge Sodergren's courtroom is that he actually does a really good job, considering that he carries a larger caseload than any of the other judges, partly due because he also handles traffic and small misdemeanor cases. But he has this already kind of set up really well as far as managing his dockets, in the sense that he has a specific day that's set for bad checks, a specific day, a law day that's set for criminal non-support. a specific time set out for traffic matters, a specific time set out for driving while suspended or probation matters, specific days that he sets out for bench trial dates or for preliminary hearing dates. And so, to that extent, I think that he does a really good job of managing his dockets. I think the backlog comes from, one, something that was mentioned the other one, which is that we only have 2 or 3 judges that are actually taking criminal cases right now because of the change of judge off of Beadham, which is going to fix itself. The other issue is that we're a little short. I mean, we have a great security system at our county, but we can barely do 2 jury trials at the same time because we only have 2 jury rooms, and one of those jury rooms does not even have a bathroom. And so I think that one way that we could solve some of the backlog as far as like people waiting to get to trial is, one, we need to fix the facilities such that we can actually have more than 2 jury trials going on at a time. Another issue is that because I do have the jury trial experience, I could actually do jury trials in the associate division. Felony criminal cases can be heard in front of an associate judge if both the state and the defense waive that right and ask for that. Then they can, so by having an associate judge that can and is willing to do jury trials would also help with the backlog. And then the other way that I could help with the backlog too is right now, I mean, I think it's like 40% of the cases are family law cases, and so because I do have a lot of extensive family law, juvenile cases, this guardianship, probate, I could take some additional family law cases, which would relieve some of the backlog for the other judges.
Okay, so a follow-up question. So are you, in your answer, are you implying that Cotton would not be able to serve as a judge over a jury trial in that type of setting?
No, you asked no, I'm not.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify myself. So, okay, I understand.
Okay.
All right, so Galen, this question goes to you. How would you assess what is working and what is not working with the current alternative courts? Do you see potential to improve or expand alternative courts within the circuit, and what would that look like?
So, there's actually a committee, and I did this when I was an assistant prosecuting attorney, that reviews, and this was on the drug court, but sits down, reviews the applicants, determines which candidates would could potentially benefit or would be successful from the alternative program, the alternative courts program. Generally speaking, our alternative program results have been really phenomenal. And I can say that on both like an average of the number of people that successfully graduate and then don't reoffend, and I can also say that from personal experience, from even having been in private practice, my own clients who have gone through DWI court, drug court, and even veterans court, and have gotten, when they've graduated from that program, have said, this program saved my life, and have not reoffended and have not gotten any more charges. And so I feel like they are very successful. And part of the reason they're successful is because there's a process of reviewing, is this particular defendant, could they benefit from this program? Have they done it before? Is it something that could be beneficial? Then I do think that we could use more alternative courts plan. I mean, we used to have another one called Breaking the Cycle, but they lost the funding for it. I mean, so part of it is money. Like, I know when they first started the DWI program court in Callaway County, it cost $3,000. So for the defendant to participate, and that just takes out an entire huge segment of your community that now can't take advantage of that alternative program because they can't afford it. So part of it has to do with money, right? And then the other thing that, and so the other court that I think would be probably most beneficial is mental health court. Our Cole County Jail probably has more people dealing with mental health problems than any other mental health facility in this county. So clearly, we need to, some type of a mental health court would probably be the next one that I would try to implement, depending on funding, because it can be expensive. But right now, we've been treating mental health as a criminal aspect rather than as a societal aspect, I feel like.
Okay, so a follow-up, what is the expense to it of creating another court?
Okay, so anytime, like for example, a DWI court, you have probation and you have a specific probation and parole officer that is designated and assigned to that court. Then you also have pathways or preferred that are providing some mental health services, whether it be AA, a treatment counselor if it's addiction issue, an alcohol addiction counselor. So there's those expenses. Then you also have, we have to staff it. We have a full-time staff that helps staff. I think he's over all 3 of the courts, but we have a full-time staff. member that staffs it. So if you start increasing the number of people that are in it, you're probably going to need to add another staff member to help manage it, to accept the applications, to review it. Then you also have some transportation issues. You have people, the drug court itself, or the DWI court, meets either, one of them meets once a week, the other one I think meets every other week. And so you have people that have to, your people, the defendants that are in it, they have to be able to have the means to get there, get off work, show up. And in addition to that, there's also their AA meetings, there's their NA meetings, there's their probation and parole officer, the probation officer that it's assigned to that particular court. So there's these kind of expenses that, and treatment expenses that go along with it.
All right. Cotton, same question.
Well, the question, and I know that you asked the follow-up for funding, but the question about what's working in the treatment courts is most of the systems are working, and they are important in any community. I agree that, and we had the benefit of listening to the prosecutor candidates in here who both talked about, and as did Galen, about a mental health court would be the next natural step to add to the treatment courts in Cole County. And you do have to have buy-in from that prosecutor's office as well as the local defense bar to make sure that they remain effective and that they achieve the goal for the individual, but also the community. That the drop in the recidivism rate, the chance that they commit, again, a similar or another crime is the goal for the community, and obviously the wellness, the treatment, the overcoming the addiction or the other issue is for the individual. And in our municipal court, we started a one-of-a-kind community partner program that models the treatment courts that are run at the state court level. And we've found a way through community partners and volunteers, including some who are just doing their job or doing it out of the goodness of their heart at no cost. There's no cost to the defendants. There's no cost to the city for the community partner program that we run in this court. And we have volunteers from some of the same agencies that Galen's identified, and it's not that we don't need that support at the courthouse level as well, but I think some of those ideas that we have in the community partner program here, which is a treatment program, can be carried up there. The other thing that you can do, and that we've done in the municipal level, is to use technology to let those people resource services. So that may mean that they don't have to come to court to get their treatment. For example, in Jeff City, we have the DWI portal program, which lets them counsel in a virtual world. So you can use the technology.
All right, thank you. Next question will be with Cotton. What is the biggest criminal problem you perceive as facing Cole County? What can you do as a judge to address the problem?
Well, and I know that, again, we had the benefit of listening to the prosecutor candidates, and it's in reading your paper when we see that drugs are the biggest problem in Cole County, and that leads to violent crimes, whether it's from somebody that is known to the victim or whether that's somebody who's involved because maybe they have an addiction or something. I believe that the thing that I intend to do, most importantly, to make it clear to those who commit violent crimes, whether they're drug-related or not, is that if you commit a crime with a weapon, a gun or another weapon, that you're going to go to jail, that you're going to go to prison, that you have to be hard on those issues with weapons offenses. Those types of violent crimes, you have to get that message across right at the start. I believe that would have an effect on the willingness, especially of young defendants, to just say, oh, well, I see it on the news and I see it in TV and movies, so I'm going to carry a gun and I'm going to use it to the way that they emulate those others. So that I think is one thing that the associate division judge can do immediately.
All right. Galen, same question.
So I think that if we're talking about, well, let me ask you this. Are you asking just in general, or are you asking about specific to Cole County? Or either? Maybe either.
I was asking specifically about Cole County.
Okay, well, I think that Cole County is part of a bigger picture here, and the bigger picture is probably the biggest problem facing the criminal justice system is drugs and drug addiction. And we've seen an increase in heroin. We saw that, I think, and it's my understanding, belief, that the increase in the heroin use is based upon the crackdown on the precursors to make meth. And so when it became more difficult, which we solved that problem, legislature solved that problem, we're seeing less of that. Now we're seeing heroin issues. And I think, so generally, I think the problem is that we've been treating drug addiction as a criminal issue instead of a public health issue. While we need to use the criminal justice system to help people help themselves to deal with their addiction. And because of this, in general, I think there's some issues with misallocation of resources. If we are spending taxpayer money and we're incarcerating people whose problem and crime is that they are drug addicts and possess their drug of choice, then instead of giving them the treatment that they need, which would be a lot cheaper than costing taxpayer money to incarcerate people, the majority of people that are incarcerated in the Missouri Department of Corrections right now are there on possession of controlled substance convictions. So the point of prisons and jails is to keep our community safe. We need to use them and utilize them. We taxpayers pay, and we need to be using those to put away people that are a danger to law-abiding citizens. And yes, as punishment, but make sure that the people that can get treatment and be successful members of our community can be out there being a successful member of our community, and that our jails and our prisons are for people that scare us and are dangerous and cause harm.
All right, so a follow-up question to both of you. If the idea is nonviolent offenders have less of a place in our correction systems, what is the teeth in the law that would prevent them from reoffending? We'll start with Galen.
Well, it's still a tool. I mean, incarceration is still a tool, even in cases where they're nonviolent and it's a drug type case, okay? You have somebody that's charged with possession of a controlled substance. They plead guilty, they're out on probation. They get another charge. Maybe they plead guilty, they're out on probation. At some point, they need to sit in jail for a while, if for no other reason than forced cleaning, forced sobriety. And so I think that, I'm not saying, if you're nonviolent and you're drug offender, you shouldn't. No, that's a tool and it needs to be used, but it needs to be used wisely. Because sometimes that's exactly what somebody needs, is they need that forced sobriety so that they can then go get the treatment that they need.
Cotton, same question.
Yeah, well, so I agree with Galen, and that it has to be a tool that you're aware of, and you know, the one thing that's, you also phrased the question in the sense of what's the teeth in the law, and I believe in harsh sentences for violent offenders and for repeat offenders, whether they've been given that opportunity either at a treatment court or on probation. As Galen said, if they give an opportunity on probation and then they don't follow through or they recommit, then you need to use that tool. What I don't like is mandatory minimums for some of those crimes, because each case is different. You do have to listen and engage as a judge which ones need that treatment connection, whether they've had that treatment connection before. I have people in this court who come in, and that's one of the questions I ask when I'm referring them to one of the community partners for treatment or connection to services is, have they even had that opportunity before? And so many of our local citizens who may have those addiction issues or mental health issues have never been asked that question, never had that opportunity.
All right. So a follow-up question to both of you to that question. So as a case comes before you, what are the guiding principles that are the foundation of the judgments that you make?
Well, I'm not sure whose turn it is.
That would be you.
So I think a judge needs to reflect the community, and the way a judge rules needs to apply the law that is set by our community, if you will. It is literally in Jefferson City, with the legislature here in Jefferson City. Apply the law to each case, but also understand and be engaged in the community in a way that you understand what the expectations of the community are to those individual cases, and when it's appropriate to have a defendant be referred to either a treatment court or services or probation or 120 days shock with treatment in the Department of Corrections, or maybe they've exhausted all those opportunities and looked justice in the eye and said, I'm not going to do that. I had to make a hard decision in the last month on somebody who had violated probation and came into court with an attitude about it, no less, having given them the opportunity to not spend any time in jail. It's a young man who has young children, but after a while, the community has to recognize, I believe the community expectations would be that that person needed to learn a lesson and go to jail, and so you have to make those decisions too.
All right, Galen, same question.
So when Tom Sodergren decided to retire, and I made the decision to run, one of the reasons was because I know what it is like to sit next to a client in a civil case or even a criminal case and try their case in front of the judge, and when we walk out of there, my client says, I don't think that judge cared, I don't think that judge listened, and I'm not talking about any specific judges. I practice all around the state and in many different counties, and I've seen good and bad judges, and they feel like that judge treated it like one of many cases, and it may have been a small case to that judge. But I also know how important it is and how justice does work when the person that's sitting next to me, when my client's sitting next to me and we walk out of that courtroom, they go, maybe we're not going to win everything we asked for, but that judge listened to me and they were fair and they paid attention to me and they made me feel like our case that was going on in the courtroom right there was the most important case that they heard at that day. And even if it's some small case having to do with some piece of property that's really not that big of a deal, but to the people that are in the courtroom, it is important. It's the most important thing going on in their life. And so my plan is that no matter how many years I sit on the bench, if I sit on the bench, I'll never forget that maybe I see 20 different types of cases in one day, but the people that are in front of me, they need to know that I care and I'm listening and that it's one of the most important things because it's important to them. And so that's something why I decided to run. As far as criminal, as far as the foundation, that's the foundation. But additionally, obviously, to be fair and impartial and to apply the law and to take each and every case individually and listen carefully and base it and make an informed decision on the law.
All right, thank you. Galen, our next question goes to you. You mentioned this in a previous answer. What are some of the changes that you believe need to be made to the physical plant, the county courthouse, to better improve efficiencies within the court system?
Well, I think our courthouse is probably one of the safest courthouses that I'm in, at least locally, right? The security is great. We have a nice old courthouse, which I would never want to change that because I really do like the oldness of it, But that is one of the problems. One, the jury rooms are not sufficient. If we have two juries going on at the same time, like I said, one of them can't use the bathroom. One of them doesn't have a bathroom. The other problem we have is that when we bring in a jury panel, which is between 60 and 70 people, right? That means the people that we're going to pick the jurors from, right? When we bring in these 60 or 70 people, they're all standing out in the hallway. And while the criminal, maybe the defendant and the defendant's family and the victims maybe and the victim's family are all there also, all kind of mingling around. So it seems like what the facility needs is a way to separate the jury panel, the people that we're picking the jury from, until they get into the courtroom, and a separate place then where we have places for the defendant and their family or the victims and their family, just a separate place where they can stay separate. So that's some, and then also too, I think that we're going to have to have, if we're going to get the other judge in 2020, we're going to have another courtroom. All
right. Cotton, same question.
Yeah, well, I agree, and unfortunately, to some degree, now we are talking about money. But I agree that Cole County, and I know that you've heard this from me, you've heard this from Galen, you've heard it in the other debates or public forums, that Cole County deserves and needs another division, and that the current courthouse would be a problem for that. Now, we remodeled the beautiful old courthouse about 20 years ago, when Judge Joyce was actually first on the bench, she held some of her trials in the library. Now, because of technology, like Galen was talking about earlier, we don't need a library per se as much anymore, and so we have remodeled that courthouse in order to accommodate the judges, but we need another one. One of the possibilities is a partnership with the city, who is building another courtroom, which could be used for jury trials. I don't know whether there's been communication with the city and county about that. The new courtroom for the municipal court has kind of not been my baby. Our city administrator kind of wants municipal court shuffled out of this space. But Galen's absolutely right, especially when there are sensitive jury trials with all the litigants and the jury pool in the hallway at the same time. Even as a practicing attorney, you walk in for a law day, or you walk in for a different division, and you're walking by all these people, and they start talking to you because you know them, and things may be said or conversations may be had that shouldn't be had by potential jury members. So that would be ideal, is to create that space for the for better handling juries. The security, it's not ideal in the way that you have to access the security, but that is going into the basement and then back up a half flight of stairs, and until we do something maybe with the old jail space, there's really not much room for any more correction to that space for that ability.
All right, thank you. All right, our last question. This came from a member of the audience here. As a judge, what was your takeaway from the Kavanaugh hearings?
You get to go first.
I guess we knew this was coming.
So Cotton, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair question for the public to ask, and because that was played out over any medium that you could see, whether it's watching live that we can do and have been for a long time, but also on social media and immediate reactions. I think to a large degree, the Senate lost track of the idea of advise and consent, and they wanted to turn, if you will, the primary witness against Judge Kavanaugh and the judge into criminal defendants both. And that's not what that process is supposed to be. There are some serious matters for the Senate to consider, and the other thing that I think that was a perversion of that process is you could watch it yourself, you could see what was said and heard, but then if you followed Twitter, 10 minutes later, somebody said, as fact, something just the opposite. And that's not how that process should work. And so in that regard, it was embarrassing for our country, regardless of the politics of whether you thought that that individual judge was qualified or did or didn't have issues in his background that the Senate should consider, whether the public should consider, that it's not for the public to select Supreme Court judge.
All right, Galen, same question.
I think that my takeaway was that one of the things that Missouri is actually famous for in the legal community is that we have what's called the Missouri Nonpartisan Courts Plan. And that is how we get our Supreme Court judges, and that's how we get our appellate court judges, and then also some specific circuits have moved to the Nonpartisan Courts Plan. And this, I think, is probably made me realize maybe this is something they should do on the federal level too, because what our plan does, in fact, other states have adopted this plan, and they even call it the Missouri Courts Plan, because we were the ones that came up with it. And I think that what this allows is you have a committee that's made up of half attorneys and half non-attorneys from the area where that particular judge is going to be practicing or sitting, and they review they accept the applications for anybody who's interested in that particular position. They interview them all, and then the committee together makes a decision of 3, and they nominate 3 people on the panel, 3 of those people that they've interviewed, and they send it to the governor, and the governor has to pick from those 3 people. And if the governor does not pick within a certain amount of time, it goes back to the panel, and they pick one of them. And so it assures that those 3 people that are presented to the governor are qualified, accepted, they've been vetted by attorneys and non-attorneys, and so it makes it less partisan, less about party line, and so if we were to do something along those lines, we wouldn't have seen all of this going on, and there would have been a committee that would have picked 3 qualified candidates that would have submitted those 3 names to the president for the president to choose from. So I think that's my takeaway from it, is maybe we need to look at that.
All right, thank you. At this point, we'll do our closing statements, and we'll start with Cotton.
Thank you, and Gary, thank you again for conducting this forum as you did in the primary and with all the other offices. I've tonight arrived a little bit late, so I didn't get to hear all the candidates. I was conducting a truancy court after I finished my docket here at Municipal Court, working with our local school district and juvenile office to try to address, get to the root of problems with school attendance and achievement for students in our community. I've served as a municipal judge for 24 years, and through that, my leadership and ability on the bench has been recognized as I've served our community, and as a public servant. I've extended that to serving on the Missouri Municipal and Associate Circuit Judges Association Board for over 20 years. I recently completed one term as president, and with that and Supreme Court appointments to OSCA, work to train judges for the best practices for a strong and independent judiciary. And thank you again.
Thank you. Gayla?
While I believe that the type of experience is very important in your consideration for an associate judge, I have the experience, broad range of experience, the jury trial experience from having been a prosecuting attorney, understanding from that aspect everything that goes with it, including search warrants, affidavits, motions in limine, all the other precursor things that come before you ever even get to a jury trial, as well as my civil experience makes me the candidate with the right kind of experience for this particular position. The other aspect I think that I have, though, is that before I went to law school, I was a teacher, and that gives me a non-legal perspective that it allows me to sort of see things from both a non-legal perspective that a lot of people don't have that went straight to law school. Not that there's any offense. I took a little break before I went on to law school. And so it just gives me, I think, a different perspective that I would bring, and the ability to listen and treat each person in the courtroom that this is the most important thing to them. So I would ask for your vote on November 6th.
All right. Well, I thank you both for coming tonight.
Thank you.
On behalf of the News Tribune, I'd also like to thank the city and JCTV for their assistance in holding and broadcasting these forums. In addition to stories about these forums, in tomorrow's News Tribune, we'll have a variety of other means by which you can become more informed about these county races. We'll be asking candidates questions that we didn't get to tonight. We've also invited these candidates to a get-together at our next Coffee with the Editor, which will be from 8 to 10 o'clock Tuesday, October 23rd at Panera Bread. It will be sort of a mixer where it'll be one-on-one. You can ask individual questions of the candidates or just listen. We'll also be publishing a voter's guide on Sunday, November 4th. All of our coverage can also be found online at newstribune.com/November 2018 election. Our society is best served by an informed and active electorate. That's what's driving our coverage of these races, why we're holding these forums, and I would encourage you as a voter to take advantage of these resources and then get out to vote on November 6th. Again, thank you for coming tonight, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.